You think staying inside keeps you safe, but what if the real danger doesn't knock on doors? What if it's already inside, quiet, invisible, and waiting for the moments when you feel most alone? There are attacks that don't come with noise, shadows that don't need darkness, and battles that happen right in the silence of your own room. When you isolate yourself, when you cut off connection, when your world shrinks to four walls, something else begins to grow. Today, we're uncovering 5 ways demonic spirits target those who never leave their house. Not to scare you, but to wake you up, because what you don't see can still control you, and what you don't fight can slowly consume you. Isolation doesn't just mean being alone, it slowly reshapes the way you think, feel, and respond to the world around you. At first, it can feel harmless, even comforting. You tell yourself you just need space, a break from people, a quiet place to think. And for a moment, it feels like control, no noise, no pressure, no expectations, just you and your own space. But what starts as comfort can quietly turn into confinement. The walls that once felt protective begin to close in, and without even realizing it, you start losing something essential, your connection to life itself. When you isolate yourself for too long, your mind begins to change. Human beings are not designed to function in complete disconnection. We are built for interaction, for shared energy, for conversations that challenge us and experiences that stretch us. Without that, your thoughts begin to echo. The same ideas repeat over and over, getting louder each time. Small worries grow into overwhelming fears. Doubts that could have been dismissed in a conversation now sit unchallenged, taking root and spreading deeper into your thinking. What could have been corrected by a simple interaction now becomes something that feels real and permanent. Isolation also weakens your emotional resilience. When you are regularly around others, you naturally build strength. You learn how to handle different personalities, how to manage stress, how to adapt when things don't go your way. But when you remove yourself from those environments, you lose those opportunities to grow. Even small challenges begin to feel heavy. Your tolerance for discomfort drops. Things that once seemed manageable start to feel overwhelming. It's not because you become weaker, it's because you've been disconnected from the very situations that keep you strong. There's also a subtle shift that happens in how you see yourself. Without outside perspectives, your identity starts to shrink. You begin to define yourself by your limitations instead of your potential. The absence of encouragement, feedback, and shared experiences creates a gap, and your mind tries to fill that gap on its own. Often it fills it with negativity. You might start believing you're not capable, not worthy, or not ready for the outside world. These thoughts don't appear suddenly. They build slowly, layer by layer, until they feel like truth. Another danger of isolation is how it affects your sense of reality. When you're constantly alone, your thoughts go unchecked. There's no balance, no grounding from other viewpoints. You start interpreting situations based only on your internal dialogue. Over time, this can distort how you see things. You might assume the worst in situations, expect rejection before it even happens, or create fears that have no real foundation. And because there's no one there to challenge those thoughts, they become stronger and more convincing. Energy also plays a role. When you're isolated, your environment becomes stagnant. There's no new input, no fresh perspectives, no change in atmosphere. This lack of movement affects your motivation. You may find it harder to get out of bed, harder to focus, harder to take action. It feels like you're stuck, like you're moving but not really going anywhere. That stagnation feeds itself. The less you do, the less you feel like doing. The more you stay inside, the harder it becomes to step out. What makes isolation especially dangerous is how normal it can start to feel. You adjust to it, you build routines around it, you convince yourself that this is just how life is now. And because there's no clear moment where everything changes, you don't notice how much you've lost along the way. The energy, the confidence, the sense of possibility, all of it slowly fades into the background. But the truth is, isolation doesn't have to define you. Recognizing its effects is the first step toward breaking free from it. The longer you stay disconnected, the more it takes from you. But the moment you begin to reach outward, even in the smallest ways, you start to reclaim your strength. Because the same mind that was shaped by isolation can be reshaped by connection, growth, and movement. And the moment you understand that, isolation loses its power over you. Negative thoughts don't usually arrive all at once. They slip in quietly, almost unnoticed. At first, it might just be a small doubt, a passing worry, a moment of overthinking, something like, what if I'm not doing enough? Or what if things never change? On their own, these thoughts don't seem dangerous. Everyone experiences them from time to time. But when you're alone for long periods with no outside voices to interrupt or challenge them, those thoughts don't leave. They stay and they start to grow. When you spend most of your time in isolation, your mind becomes both the speaker and the listener. There's no balance, no interruption, no reality check. The same thoughts replay again and again, each time gaining more weight. What was once a small concern begins to feel like a serious problem. What was once a temporary feeling starts to feel permanent. It's like being in a room where your own voice echoes endlessly. After a while, it becomes hard to tell what's real and what's just repetition. The danger is not just in having negative thoughts, it's in how they evolve when they go unchecked. In a connected environment, a conversation can break that cycle. A simple interaction can shift your perspective, remind you of something you forgot, or show you that your fear isn't as big as it feels. But in isolation, there's nothing to interrupt the pattern. Your mind keeps building on the same idea, adding layers of doubt, fear, and uncertainty until it becomes overwhelming. Over time, these thoughts begin to shape your mindset. You may start to expect the worst in situations before they even happen. You might assume failure without trying, or rejection without reaching out. Even neutral situations can start to feel negative because your mind has been trained to lean in that direction. It's not that the world has changed, it's that your internal filter has. And once that filter is in place, everything you see and experience passes through it. Another subtle shift happens in how you talk to yourself. The inner voice that once encouraged you can become critical. Instead of saying, "I can figure this out," it starts saying, "I'm not capable." Instead of, "This is just a tough moment," it becomes, "This is how it will always be." That voice becomes more convincing the longer it goes unchallenged, and because it's your own voice, it feels trustworthy, even when it's leading you in the wrong direction. Negative thoughts also have a way of feeding your emotions. The more you think about something fearful or discouraging, the more you begin to feel it. Anxiety, sadness, and frustration start to build, even if nothing in your external environment has changed. It becomes an internal storm, created entirely by repetition and focus. And once those emotions take hold, they make it even harder to think clearly. It turns into a cycle. Your thoughts affect your feelings, and your feelings reinforce your thoughts. Isolation amplifies this cycle because there's no contrast. There are no new experiences to shift your mood, no conversations to bring lightness, no unexpected moments to break the pattern. Everything begins to feel predictable, heavy, and stuck. The mind craves stimulation and variety, but when it doesn't get it, it turns inward. And that's where negative thinking finds its space to grow. You might also notice how these thoughts begin to affect your actions. When your mind is filled with doubt or fear, you naturally start to pull back. You avoid situations, delay decisions, and stay within what feels safe, even if that safe space is actually limiting you. The more you avoid, the more those thoughts feel justified. It becomes proof in your mind that you were right to feel that way, even though the reality is you never gave yourself a chance to experience something different. What makes this especially challenging is how real it all feels. Negative thoughts don't present themselves as just thoughts. They feel like facts, like truth, like something you should listen to. And without outside input, there's nothing to question them. They settle in, becoming part of your daily thinking, shaping how you see yourself and your future. But the important thing to understand is that these thoughts only gain power when they go unchallenged. The moment you introduce something different, a new perspective, a conversation, a change in environment, you begin to weaken their hold. They lose their dominance because they're no longer the only voice in the room. Your mind starts to expand again, and with that expansion comes clarity. Negative thoughts may start quietly, but they don't have to take over. Awareness is what breaks the cycle. The more you recognize the pattern, the less control it has over you. And once you begin to step outside of isolation, even in small ways, you create space for new thoughts, new energy, and a different direction. Because your mind is not meant to be trapped in repetition. It's meant to grow, explore, and move forward. Fear and anxiety rarely take over all at once. They build slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. It often starts with a small sense of unease, a moment where something doesn't feel right, even though nothing around you has actually changed. When you spend most of your time inside, Disconnected from the outside world, those small moments don't pass the way they normally would. Instead, they linger. They sit in your mind longer than they should, and the more attention you give them, the stronger they become. At first, the fear might not even have a clear reason. It's just a feeling, something in your chest, a tension in your thoughts, a sense that something could go wrong. Normally, daily life would interrupt that feeling. You'd step outside, talk to someone, shift your focus, and your mind would reset. But when you're isolated, there's nothing to break that pattern. The feeling stays, and your mind begins searching for reasons to justify it. It starts creating what-if scenarios, imagining possibilities that haven't happened and may never happen. That's where anxiety begins to grow. Your mind moves from one thought to another, each one slightly worse than the last. What if something bad happens, turns into, what if I can't handle it? And then into, what if everything falls apart? These thoughts don't need evidence. They feed off repetition. The more you think them, the more real they feel. And because you're alone, there's no one there to challenge them, to remind you that you're overthinking, or to offer a different perspective. Fear has a way of narrowing your world. As it grows, you begin to see more things as threats, even things that used to feel normal. Going outside might start to feel overwhelming. Interacting with people might feel exhausting or risky. Even simple decisions can feel heavy because your mind is constantly trying to predict every possible outcome, and most of those outcomes lean toward the negative. It's not that the world has become more dangerous, it's that your perception of it has shifted. Anxiety also affects your body, not just your thoughts. You might notice your heart racing without a clear reason, your breathing becoming shallow, or a constant feeling of restlessness. Your body stays in a state of alert, as if it's preparing for something that isn't actually happening. Over time, this becomes exhausting. You feel drained, even if you haven't done much physically, because your mind and body have been working overtime, trying to manage invisible threats. One of the most difficult parts of this experience is how it begins to control your choices. When fear becomes a regular presence, you start organizing your life around avoiding it. You choose what feels safe, even if it limits you. You avoid situations that might trigger discomfort, even if those situations could help you grow. At first, this avoidance feels like relief. You tell yourself you're protecting your peace, but over time, that peace turns into restriction. Your world gets smaller, your comfort zone gets tighter, and the fear quietly takes control. The longer this continues, the more normal it starts to feel. You might begin to think, this is just how I am now, or this is just my personality. But the truth is, it's a pattern that has developed over time, a pattern that was shaped by isolation and reinforced by repetition. Fear and anxiety are not fixed parts of who you are. They are responses that have been given too much space to grow. Another subtle effect is how it impacts your confidence. When you're constantly feeling anxious, you start doubting your ability to handle situations. You might think you're not strong enough, not capable enough, or not ready to face certain challenges. But that belief doesn't come from reality. It comes from lack of exposure. When you're not regularly stepping into different situations, you don't get the chance to prove to yourself that you can handle them. So your mind fills that gap with doubt instead of evidence. What's important to understand is that fear grows in stillness, but it weakens in movement. The more you stay in the same environment, repeating the same thoughts, the stronger it becomes. But the moment you introduce change, no matter how small, you begin to disrupt that pattern. Even something as simple as stepping outside, changing your routine, or having a conversation can start to shift your mindset. It reminds your mind that there is more than what it has been focusing on. Anxiety thrives on predictability and repetition, but it struggles with new experiences and fresh input. When you begin to step out, even in small ways, you create opportunities for your mind to reset. You start gathering new evidence that not everything is a threat, that you can handle more than you thought, and that the world is not as overwhelming as your mind made it seem. Fear and anxiety may feel powerful, especially when they've been building for a long time, but they are not unbreakable. They are patterns, and patterns can be changed. The key is recognizing that what you feel is not the full picture. It's just one perspective that has been repeated too often. The moment you begin to challenge it, to step beyond it, you start to take that power back. And slowly, what once controlled you begins to lose its grip. Lack of purpose doesn't usually hit you like a sudden realization. It creeps in quietly, almost unnoticed. At first, it just feels like a slow day, maybe even a peaceful one. You wake up without urgency, move through your routine without pressure, and tell yourself it's okay to take things easy. But when days like that turn into weeks and weeks into months, something deeper begins to shift. You're still moving, still existing, but it starts to feel like you're not really going anywhere. There's no clear direction, no sense of meaning driving your actions, just repetition. When you spend most of your time inside, disconnected from responsibilities, challenges, or meaningful goals, it becomes easy to lose sight of why you're doing anything at all. Purpose is often built through engagement with people, with work, with experiences that demand something from you. Without those interactions, your days can begin to blur together. One day feels like the next, and the absence of progress becomes harder to ignore. You might find yourself asking, "What am I actually doing?" but not having a clear answer. This lack of purpose slowly affects your motivation. When you don't feel like your actions are leading anywhere, it becomes harder to start anything. Even simple tasks can feel pointless. You might delay things not because they're difficult, but because they don't feel meaningful. Over time, this creates a cycle. No purpose leads to low motivation, and low motivation makes it even harder to find purpose. It's not laziness, it's a lack of direction. Without something to move towards, standing still begins to feel like the only option. There's also an emotional weight that comes with this emptiness. It's not always intense, but it's persistent, a quiet feeling that something is missing, even if you can't fully explain what it is. You might try to distract yourself through entertainment, scrolling, or temporary activities, but those moments don't last. Once they're over, the same feeling returns. It's a kind of emptiness that doesn't make noise, but it stays in the background, affecting how you experience everything else. Another challenge is how this lack of purpose begins to shape your identity. When you're actively pursuing goals or engaging with the world, you build a sense of who you are. You see your strengths, your interests, your growth. But in isolation, that identity can become unclear. You're not being challenged, not discovering new things about yourself, not testing your limits. So you start to feel stuck, unsure of what you're capable of or where you fit. The longer this continues, the more distant that sense of self becomes. Without purpose, time also starts to feel different. It can feel slower, heavier. Hours pass, but they don't feel productive or fulfilling. At the end of the day, you might struggle to remember what you actually did or why it mattered. This can lead to frustration, even guilt, because deep down you know you're capable of more, but you don't know how to access it from where you are. What makes this especially difficult is that the comfort of staying inside can hide the problem. You might tell yourself you're just resting, recharging, or taking a break. And in small amounts, that's true. Rest is necessary. But when rest turns into avoidance and avoidance turns into routine, it begins to take something from you. The comfort becomes a barrier, keeping you from stepping into situations that could give your life meaning again. Purpose doesn't always come from something big or dramatic. It often starts with small steps, doing something that challenges you, helping someone, learning something new, or simply committing to a goal, even if it's a simple one. But when you're isolated, those opportunities are limited and it becomes harder to take that first step. The longer you wait, the more distant that sense of purpose feels. There's also a connection between purpose and energy. When you have something meaningful to work toward, it naturally fuels you. You wake up with more intention, you move with more focus, and even challenges feel worth facing. But without that, your energy can feel low, scattered, or inconsistent. It's not just physical, it's mental and emotional. You're not being pulled forward by anything, so everything feels heavier. The important thing to understand is that this emptiness is not permanent. It's not who you are. It's a result of your current environment and habits. Purpose is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you build. And even if it feels far away right now, it can start to return the moment you begin to engage again. It doesn't require a complete life change overnight, just a willingness to step out of repetition and into something new. Even small actions can begin to shift things, setting a goal no matter how simple, changing your routine, reaching out, learning, creating, moving. Each of these steps adds a sense of direction back into your life. And as that direction grows, so does your sense of purpose. It starts to fill the space that once felt empty, giving your days meaning again. Lack of purpose can feel like being stuck in place, but the truth is you're never truly stuck. The moment you choose to move, even slightly, you begin to change the path you're on. And with that movement comes clarity, energy, and a renewed sense that your life is not just something you pass through, it's something you can actively shape and build. Repetition can feel safe. There's a certain comfort in doing the same things every day, following the same routine, staying within the same environment where everything is familiar and predictable. You know what to expect, you know how your day will go, and there's no pressure to adjust or adapt. At first, this kind of consistency can even feel productive, like you found a rhythm that works for you. But when that repetition lacks growth, challenge, or variation, it slowly turns into something else: stagnation. When your days begin to look exactly the same, your mind and energy follow that pattern. You wake up, do the same activities, think the same thoughts, and go to sleep without anything truly changing. Over time, this creates a loop that becomes harder and harder to break. It's not just about routine anymore, it's about being stuck in a cycle where nothing new enters your life. And without new input, your mind has nothing to expand on. It starts recycling the same ideas, the same emotions, the same habits until everything begins to feel repetitive and heavy. This kind of stagnation affects your motivation in a subtle but powerful way. When there's no sense of progress, it becomes difficult to feel excited about anything. Even things you once enjoyed can start to feel dull, not because they've lost their value, but because your mind has become used to them. There's no novelty, no challenge, no sense of movement. It's like watching the same scene play over and over again. You already know what's coming, so your interest fades. Another effect of repetitive habits is how they shape your mindset. The more you repeat the same actions, the more they become automatic. You stop questioning them, stop thinking about whether they're helping you grow or holding you back. They just become part of your daily life. And if those habits are limiting, if they keep you inside, disconnected and unchallenged, they begin to define your reality. You start to believe that this is all there is, that this is just how life works now. Stagnation also impacts your sense of progress. Human beings naturally seek growth. We want to improve, to move forward, to feel like we're becoming something more. When that growth is absent, it creates a quiet frustration. You may not always be able to explain it, but it's there. A feeling that you're capable of more, but you're not reaching it. This gap between where you are and where you feel you could be can lead to dissatisfaction, even if everything on the surface seems stable. There's also a connection between repetition and energy. When you're doing the same things every day without variation, your energy levels can drop. Your mind becomes less engaged, your focus weakens, and tasks begin to feel more tiring than they should. It's not because you're doing too much, it's because you're not being stimulated in new ways. Your brain thrives on challenge and change, and without those elements, it begins to slow down. What makes this cycle difficult to break is how comfortable it feels. Even if you're not fully satisfied, you know what to expect. Stepping outside of that routine requires effort, uncertainty, and sometimes discomfort. And because you've been in the same pattern for so long, even small changes can feel overwhelming. So you stay where you are, not because it's fulfilling, but because it's familiar. Over time, this familiarity can turn into a kind of mental fog. You may find it harder to think creatively, to come up with new ideas, or to see different possibilities for your life. Your perspective narrows, shaped by the limited experiences you're having each day. The world outside your routine begins to feel distant, almost unreachable, even though it's still there. Repetitive habits don't just affect what you do, they affect how you see yourself. When you're not trying new things, not facing challenges, not stepping outside your comfort zone, you don't get the chance to discover new strengths or abilities. You remain in the same version of yourself, not because you can't grow, but because your environment isn't encouraging it. And the longer you stay in that state, the more it starts to feel permanent. But the truth is, this cycle is not fixed. It may feel strong because it's been repeated so many times, but repetition can work both ways. Just as habits can keep you stuck, new habits can move you forward. The key is introducing change, even in small amounts. It doesn't have to be drastic. A new activity, a different routine, a small challenge. These are enough to begin shifting your pattern. Breaking the cycle doesn't happen all at once. It starts with awareness, recognizing that what feels comfortable may actually be limiting you. From there, it's about taking small steps that disrupt the repetition. Each new experience adds something different to your day, giving your mind new material to work with, new energy to build on. Stagnation thrives in sameness, but it weakens in movement. The more you allow variety into your life, the more your mindset begins to open up again. You start to feel progress, even in small ways. And with that progress comes renewed motivation, clarity, and a sense that you're no longer just repeating life, you're actively living it.